Explosions and gunfire at the international airport in Istanbul. At least 10 people are dead after 2 suspects blew themselves up. The attack occurred at about 8 o'clock our time. We'll get the latest from Turkey. Also tonight, turmoil in the Labour Party.
Seamus, I'm not sure this is a great idea. Is that my job?
We'll hear from 2 Labour MPs, one on each side of the Corbyn divide. And Lord Heseltine on the Conservatives' leadership contest and our relationship with the EU. And Emily gets the reaction to Brexit of Marine Le Pen, leader of the French Front National party.
Je crois qu'on a assisté à un événement historique, l'événement le plus important depuis la chute du mur de Berlin.
Good evening. Well, it was earlier this evening that news started coming through of explosions at the Ataturk airport in Istanbul. It is the main airport in the city. It's actually the 3rd busiest in Europe. Explosions and gunfire were heard. The location of the attack was outside the security checkpoint to the international terminal. This is one of those airports with security at the entrance as well as at departures to the airside terminals. Now, the latest we've heard is that the airport is being evacuated, although there are still people inside the terminals. You can see here video put onto social media. This is about an hour ago. Travellers hiding inside the airport shortly after the explosion. Now, the governor of Istanbul has, I believe, confirmed in the last few moments that there have been, in fact, 28 fatalities and many, many more injured. Reports on the ground say that a suicide bomber was rugby tackled to the ground by a police officer and that there were 3 separate explosions. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. Well, planes in the air are being allowed to land, but flights are not taking off from the airport. Earlier, we heard from Mark Lowen. He's our Turkey correspondent and is actually grounded on a plane at the airport, unable to disembark.
I just landed this evening about an hour and a half ago on a flight from Nice, and we are being kept, of course, on board the plane, not allowed to disembark because of what is happening inside the airport and the carnage there. We're hearing that explosions around the international terminal area, one possibly in the car park as well. We understand that one of the attackers, as you heard in James's report, opened fire with a Kalashnikov before blowing himself up with a suicide belt. We understand there are reports that one of them was wrestled to the ground by police officers as well. We're not being told when we're going to be allowed to leave the aircraft, of course. For the time being, there's been no claim of responsibility, but as James was saying, Turkey has been really in the grip of a terrible spiral of violence in the last year. Some attacks blamed on so-called Islamic State, including one earlier this month, some on Kurdish militants, including a mortar attack at Istanbul's second airport, Sabiha Gökçen Airport, back in December, that was claimed by Kurdish militants, a group calling itself TAK. Now, I have to say, Sophie, that I have lived here for 2 years, and I have often thought, coming into this airport, that it is a potentially vulnerable place, and that an attack could take place here because cars are really not searched very often coming into the airport area. That said, as you come into the terminal building, there are X-ray machines and scanners for anybody coming in even before the check-in desks. And so what appears to have happened tonight is that the attackers appear to have breached the perimeter of the airport, managed to get in towards the terminal building, and there they have set off their attacks with such tragic consequences.
That's Mark Lowen there. Well, I mean, Istanbul is 2 hours ahead of us. It's late there now. There will, of course, be updates on the news channel and on BBC News Online. Now, it is Brexit Day 5, and in both Westminster and Brussels, it's getting fractious.
Isn't it funny?
The British people voted in favour of the exit. Why are you here?
Seamus, I'm not sure this is a great idea. Is that my job?
We now offer a beacon of hope to Democrats across the rest of the European continent.
Well, lots to talk about, but we start with Labour. What happens in a political party when the leader loses the confidence of 3/4 of the party's MPs but refuses to step aside? Until the 1980s, it was the MPs who chose the leader in the main parties, so the MPs got their way. But now grassroots party members have the ultimate say, and they can disagree with the MPs. And in Labour, Jeremy Corbyn is pinning his hopes on that activist power. It really is two sides fighting over a political party, quite possibly to the death. Neither side seems willing to back down. Well, our political editor Nick Watt reports.
Tonight, the historic Labour standoff shows no signs of abating. A battle for the soul and survival of the Labour Party is in full flow.
Health in housing and education and all the other areas.
Earlier today, Jeremy Corbyn invited television cameras in to show off his new shadow cabinet to the world. It was a tad awkward.
Seamus, I'm not sure this is a great idea.
Is that my job?
Within hours, Labour MPs were taking part in the confidence vote. More than 3/4 withdrew their support. A mere 40 supported their leader, prompting one ally to say that Jeremy Corbyn had at least improved on the 36 who nominated him last year. He was defiant. I was democratically elected leader of our party for a new kind of politics by 60% of Labour members and supporters, and I will not betray them by resigning. Today's vote by MPs has no constitutional legitimacy. Jeremy Corbyn's supporters rushed out of Parliament to put their mark on the result. They said that unless he stands down, the politics of Corbyn and his supporters could threaten the very existence of the Labour Party.
This is what we saw with the airstrikes. Jeremy's response is to turn to the mob and to turn on MPs, and it's all their fault. I think Jeremy needs to understand that MPs were elected by their constituents. Many MPs got between 20 and 30,000 votes in their constituency, and the Labour Party got 9.5 million votes. That is a huge mandate. We've got to represent those people.
The membership are absolutely central to everything we do. You know, they're the people that we go to, they're the people that we listen to. But what I would also say is, yes, Jeremy does have a huge mandate, but if you think 170 MPs, we've all been voted for by 30, 40,000 people, that's a big mandate as well. And we have a duty, I have a duty, to my constituents first and foremost, to my party second, and then to my leader. And I would love that to be in synergy, but at the moment it's just not.
The atmosphere is so gloomy, there is even talk of a split in the Labour Party, reviving memories of the breakaway Gang of Four in 1981. I asked one party veteran if history could repeat itself.
It could. I mean, the reality is, if he stays and he wins, I mean, there has to be a real effort made to stop that.
Friends of Jeremy Corbyn say they've sensed weakness in their opponents because they've not followed official Labour Party rules which stipulate that a leader can only be challenged if 51 MPs support a rival candidate. The message from the Corbyn camp tonight is, bring on the fight. Corbyn in, Tories out. Jeremy Corbyn's supporters feel so strongly because they believe the battle goes to the heart of where power should lie in the Labour Party. They say ultimate authority must rest with thousands of Labour members and not a few hundred MPs.
It's actually Labour Party members who spend their time knocking on doors, speaking to people in their communities, trying to build the Labour vote, trying to build the Labour movement, trying to build an organisation. It's them who are closest to the voters, not the MPs. The MPs are incredibly out of touch, I think. That's why we've seen these shocks in politics. No one knows what's going on. That's why we've seen the rise of the SNP, the rise of UKIP, Brexit, Jeremy Corbyn's victory last summer.
And research published today shows that Jeremy Corbyn enjoys strong support among party members. When asked if Corbyn should automatically be on a future leadership ballot, 77% of Labour Party members agreed, a figure which goes up to 89% amongst those who joined after the general election last year. 59% of Labour Party members said they would vote for Corbyn if he were challenged by another MP, compared with 80% amongst later joiners. Labour grappled with its future on a typical English midsummer's day. But there was a very un-British feel of revolution in the air as Westminster comes to terms with the aftershocks of last week's referendum earthquake. It was all smiles when the then shadow cabinet put on a show of unity during the referendum campaign. But tonight, they are trying to agree on a unity candidate to challenge Jeremy Corbyn. The names in the frame are Tom Watson, Angela Eagle and Owen Smith.
Nick Watt there. Well, joining me now is Seaman Malhotra, who resigned as Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury on Sunday, and Barry Gardner, who is the newly minted Shadow Energy Secretary. Congratulations on your elevation. This isn't sustainable, is it? It's just ridiculous.
I think people will find it incredible that at a time when the pound has dropped to a 35-year low, when there is a 12% cut in the value of annuities for pensioners, when the Prime Minister has been forced to resign because he called a referendum and then didn't win it, but called it purely for party.
We know how bad it is. Go on, what's the answer to the...
I think it's incredible. The public will think, how could it be that at that moment, when the government most needed to be held to account, that the Labour Party, instead of thinking about the country, thought more about its own internal leadership spat and turned in on itself.
I mean, maybe it was because they felt Jeremy Corbyn wasn't the man to point out all the things you've just been pointing out, that almost anybody else could be doing it more effectively with the electorate. Now, isn't that a fair critique? If he isn't the man, he isn't the man.
No, I don't think it is a fair critique, because I think this was always a plot that was waiting for its opportunity.
But there may be an election soon, and that suddenly put a little bit of urgency into what the rebels
Which is
felt.
exactly why those who want to get rid of Jeremy should go by the party rule, and they should put up a candidate.
Well, they will, and then you're going to have a contest.
And then there's a contest. But that's the democratic way.
Okay, and
the way but the way they tried to do it was to get people to resign. Now, all those mass resignations, the effect of that would have been there was nobody at the dispatch box against the government ministers. People would have looked at the House of Commons and thought, where's the Labour Party gone?
Well, I think they are looking at
why have they abrogated their responsibility to hold this government to account?
There are, I think, what is it, about 100 MPs who are on the payroll, the shadow ministerial team. It's a lot. We saw the picture there. If the leader of the party cannot assemble a shadow ministerial team because there are not enough MPs to work for him, would that, for you, be a cause for him to say, OK, the game's up?
Look, there is only one way to change the leader, and it's the way our party has set out, and that is for the candidate to come forward, supported by 51 MPs, and then it to go to the party.
And that is...
We do not own this party as members of Parliament.
Seaman Malhotra, just on the resignation issue, you resigned on Sunday. Did you coordinate the timing of your resignation with anybody else so that there was this drip, drip, on the hour, every hour, a ministerial resignation?
I did not coordinate the timing of my resignation. I resigned after I had had a chance to talk to John McDonnell and to Jeremy Corbyn and explain my reasons for stepping down.
So is it just coincidence that there has been this stream really of regular resignations that do appear to be designed to maximise the news value of the resignations and to elongate the process as much as possible?
I wish that this hadn't happened, and
Is it coincidence that it happened?
No, I think there was a turning point, and the turning point was the sacking of Hilary Benn, which to do that in the middle of the night and in that way, I believe was not right. And the truth is that Jeremy was likely to face a vote of no confidence, and it became clearer that he was going to lose that vote of no confidence. I don't believe that was right for him to go through, and I don't believe it was right for the party. For all his qualities, Jeremy is not the leader we need to take us forward.
Tomorrow, we're expecting either Angela Eagle, maybe Tom Watson, to put themselves forward as a challenger with at least... It's not going to be difficult for a challenger to get 50 MPs behind them, presumably, correct?
I think that's likely from the result today.
Yeah.
But
who is it going to be, do you think?
I don't know who it will be.
You don't know? But you must have been involved in discussions about it.
I don't know who it will be, but I think it comes down to this fundamental, which is that we have an unelectable leader. And if we lose elections, then the price of our failure is paid by the working people of this country and their families who do not have a government to stand up for them. I believe that we do need a Labour leader who can lead us to be a credible opposition, look like a government in waiting, and reach out to the voters that we have lost.
And that the big problem for you is that if, as we see from that poll, potentially the members will put Jeremy Corbyn back as leader, what are your choices at that stage? Just take me through the menu of options you have at that stage.
I understand that, and I also understand the dilemma that Jeremy faces, because he does believe he has a responsibility to those members who elected him. But we have a bigger responsibility as well, and that is to our country. I hope that he will still do the right thing. There is still time for him to resign.
And if he doesn't do that,
with
sorry,
dignity.
we have to get to the chase quickly.
Yeah.
If he doesn't do that, I mean, there is an option, call it the nuclear option, which in fact you basically say, look, we, the Parliamentary Party, are declaring UDI. We are respecting Angela Regal as our leader in the House of Commons. Is that something you could countenance happening?
I think we are taking this one day at a time. This is unprecedented in the history of our party.
Would you rule this out?
This is unprecedented. I don't think we want to see this get any worse. It is affecting the mood and the morale. It's deeply distressing in the party and also for our staff. We want this to end. We want an amicable way
But you're not ruling out at some point that there would be a separation. The Parliamentary Party would say, for our purposes, so-and-so is our
I
leader.
don't think we've got to that point.
No, we haven't got
have
to
a
that
responsibility as to be an effective opposition and to look like a government in waiting. I believe the first thing we need to do now is a fresh start and change our leader.
Now, I know that the two of you are not here to argue with each other, and that's not, we've agreed you're not going to do that. But I wonder if I can get you each to reflect on how on earth Labour gets out of this standoff. Because essentially, you're playing a game of chicken. You're going to destroy your party. One of you has to give in. Corbyn has to go, or the Parliamentary Party has to give in, or you're simply going to destroy the party in the next election, because nobody thinks you could win an election with a leader who doesn't have the confidence of the MPs and the candidates.
The biggest issue here is the confidence of people in Labour. I had a message from somebody today who's a floating voter who said that with that overwhelming result, if Jeremy doesn't stand aside, then this result is going to undermine everything that the Labour Party does or says.
So your solution is that Jeremy Corbyn gives in and
I think he has to do the right thing, and it will be with
his solution is that you yield to him.
But I think
you're going to destroy the party.
Evan, I just want to make one point. I just want to make one point here.
I don't see this as my giving in to Seema or Seema giving in to me. Okay, we're colleagues. We've been good colleagues for many years.
And it's not left or right.
The issue here is, do you follow the process that the party collectively agreed, or do you try to do a backdoor maneuver to undermine the elected leader? As I say, the party does not belong to us.
What is your solution? When the vast bulk of the elected representatives, the ones who have been actually elected by people outside the party, say we don't like the guy who is leading the party. Do you go into an election with them honestly saying we don't like the leader? It's not going to work, is it?
I think what you have to do is you have to trust the electorate that we have, which is the entire membership of the party, including members of Parliament, who have the power to nominate candidates for that, to trust the party to arrive at the right decision.
Last word, Seema.
I still say this. This is about us being an effective opposition and about looking like a government in waiting.
The rules are the rules, and you're basically...
And the rules, in a sense, have been followed. But I think we have to look at the spirit...
Well, the rules won't be followed. If he's re-elected, will you respect him when he's re-elected?
This is about the spirit as well as the rules. And I think if you've got a leader that has lost the overwhelming confidence of the Parliamentary Labour Party, that sends a message out into the country.
So you
I believe that Jeremy...
Sorry, I don't
I can believe that Jeremy can play a leading role in the party in a different way. But I think we now need desperately a fresh start.
But you won't effectively rally behind the leader, even if he's elected by the Constitution, as it exists, of the Labour Party.
Well, I don't know why Jeremy would want to go through this. It's not going to be the same as a leadership election before. It's going to be bruising, divisive and distressing.
The point is, Jeremy never had the confidence of the majority of the Parliamentary Labour Party. Let's not forget that. When he was nominated, he scraped 36
nominations.
nominations.
They gave him a chance at that point, and they tried to make it work, and they now think it doesn't work, and that's why they've said
And many of our colleagues worked hard.
My point, Evan, is that he has never had the confidence of the vast majority of Labour MPs. I didn't vote for him. I didn't nominate him. But the party chose, in its wisdom, to have him as its leader. We must work with that and then use the rules that the party has set to change the leader if we don't like him.
So sorry, we do have to leave it there. The therapy has to cease. All right, meanwhile, the real drama is still surely the European one, our impending divorce. What kind of deal will strike with the EU? The action moved to Brussels today with the European Council meeting for the first time since Thursday and the Parliament debating Brexit. It is hard to know from the chorus of diverse voices out there which ones really matter, which ones are noises off, and which ones are mere bluff. Our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban, is in Brussels.
The long-simmering antagonism between Brussels and British Euroscepticism finally erupted like a summer storm today. The man whose political life had led to this moment, savouring his hour of triumph.
I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union. You all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you?
The manner of Farage's victory was too much for some ardent federalists who denounced the man and his campaign.
Is the way it succeeded. The absolute negative campaign. The posters of Mr. Farage showing refugees like in Nazi propaganda because they copied it at that moment.
And to some
Jean-Claude
extent,
Juncker joined in.
I'm really surprised that you are here. You were fighting for the exit. The British people voted in favor of the exit. Why are you here?
But extraordinary as these scenes were, the European Parliament is not controlling the pace of Britain's exit. That is a matter for Europe's leaders. And it was David Cameron's arrival, presumably for the last time, that heralded the day's main event. Even at this moment of high diplomatic drama, there are people trying to slow the pace. Most obviously and importantly the Germans, who seem increasingly open about their motive.
The worst thing that can happen is Brexit, and it remains the worst thing. And now, after the referendum, which is not legally binding, I think there is no sense, really no sense, in urging the Britons to accomplish what is considered by all of us to be the worst outcome we can think of.
Leading those trying to close off any renegotiation or other British prevarication, President Hollande.
I regret this choice, but I want to respect it. I cannot imagine a British government, no matter who it is, not respecting the choice of their own people.
Difficult situation. It's there.
The Luxembourgers reminded the Brits EU membership was a binary choice.
The government decided now with the referendum to get into divorce. We are not on Facebook, you know, it's not complicated, the status, it's all together or not together, it's not one step in, one step out.
And the Belgians added to the chorus.
We can't accept that there should be a double game, that despite this referendum there should be a new file opened that will block the European project for months and months.
I think
the first thing is... But then listen to those in no hurry. Ireland.
The party will elect a new Prime Minister. That Prime Minister will then decide what their view is. They may need some short time, but you can't have a drift into uncertainty here.
Very open and very constructive.
And then the Estonians, suggesting the talking wasn't over yet.
The possible future talks with UK should not be carried in the spirit of revenge. That has to be very clear. UK remains to be a very important player for us, economically, politically, also security-wise.
But also to us. But what happens if Article 50 has never been triggered? Then are you going...
And what would Lithuania say if Britain never invoked Article 50?
Welcome back.
You can delay Article 50, but does that really get you anywhere? The assumption seems to be it might create an opportunity for Britain to think again. Superficially, at least, the governments here all accept the result of the referendum, and with it that Britain is on its way out of the EU. And yet, despite the fact that just today they've said they don't want any sorts of informal negotiations before Britain formally says it's going, some kind of talks on the margins must be a possibility. Tonight, intriguingly, we heard David Cameron had told fellow leaders they'd have to do something about freedom of movement. Negotiating? No, but maybe laying down a marker for his successor. And their message to him, well, here's one German version.
What do you think how this story goes on? Do you think that there is a chance in it, a potential for making it better than it seems now? And what can we Europeans do to rescue the relationship?
Britain then ends this day, still heading for the exit, but a debate is ongoing about whether anything can or should be done to stop that. Hot foot from the Prime Minister's news conference, where I have to say there was little comfort for those who think that perhaps Britain might change its mind. He said the result of the referendum will be carried through and referred to himself repeatedly as a Democrat. But he did also give some fascinating insights into what lies ahead. He talked about the kind of advice he would give his successor. It's clear that in his mind that these sorts of choices between the different models have to be made before Britain invokes Article 50. That suggests many more months of thought will need to be given to this, during which time, of course, all sorts of events, economic and political, might intervene.
Mark Urban in Brussels there. Thank you very much indeed. Well, suddenly the Tory party's leadership election, the one that actually picks our Prime Minister, looks like the most sedate of the various dramas surrounding us. Candidates must declare by Thursday at noon. The winner will be selected by the 9th of September. That's a week later than was thought yesterday. And there's a lot of talk of a possible election soon after that. Keep the Thursdays on or after October the 13th free, because we haven't had enough chances to vote lately. Nick Watt, our political editor, is with me. What news from the campaigns, the leadership campaigns, Nick?
The news from the campaigns, we will have the first contender out of the blocks tomorrow. That is Stephen Crabb, the recently appointed Work and Pension Secretary. He's going to form a dream ticket with Sajid Javid, the Business Secretary, and they're going to say we are a new generation and from a new background, because Stephen Crabb was brought up by a single parent and he once had to protect his mother from his violent father. Then on Thursday we will have the big beasts, Boris Johnson and Theresa May, and what will happen is MPs will have until the end of the summer recess to whittle those down to 2. Now, the Boris Johnson camp are very confident. They've reported in The Sun tonight that he's got around 100 Conservative MPs supporting him. The Sun also reports of a bit of a tense standoff between Boris Johnson and Theresa May. But generally, I'm finding this quite a good-natured contest. You may remember during the referendum campaign that Amber Rudd, the Climate and Energy Secretary, said to Boris Johnson, "I wouldn't trust you to drive me home at night." Boris Johnson was saying to her, "Amber, can I drive you home tonight?" Now, it looks like, on paper, Boris Johnson is the front runner and Theresa May is in second place. But the lesson I have learned from covering Tory leadership contests is never make predictions, and as Lord Heseltine will be able to say to you, the front runner rarely wins. I was talking to one grandee today who said not since 1955 and Sir Anthony Eden has the front runner won.
Nick, thank you. Lord Heseltine, the one Tory who's had a few battles over Europe himself and over the leadership of his party. Are you going to tell us who you're supporting in the leadership?
I'm not, because to me that's not the fundamental issue we're dealing with. We have a constitutional crisis of a scale that has never existed in my life. And the real trauma is that every day that goes past in the boardrooms of the world, and of course this country, decisions are being delayed. And they will go on being delayed until there is a clarity about Britain's economic future. And I'm appalled at the idea that we're going to take months to get to a position where we can decide how to proceed, and then years before we come to a conclusion. And the damage that will do in terms of lost investment and avoided decisions is incalculable.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. So firstly, you would say speed this process up so we get a Prime Minister sooner, correct? I mean, it took 3 days, I think, 5 days when you were competing with John Major for the post-Thatcher position. We're now in a position of 12 weeks or something, aren't we? 10 weeks or something.
12 weeks before we have a Prime Minister, but there is no need for the negotiations to wait, right, because the negotiations will be the same whoever is the leader.
Will they?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I mean,
but don't we need to Prime Minister to set out their stall as to what our position is?
The stall has been set out by the Europeans. There will be no negotiations until you have triggered clause 50. And this, what is happening, and it's chilling really, because the British people have been sold a deceitful pup. We were told by the Brexit campaign that they'd be all right because the Europeans are desperate to keep us in, and so we'll have a conversation and we'll get a sensible arrangement. The truth is, the Europeans have said, on your bike. You took the trouble to make this decision, we're not negotiating. And every day that passes, the uncertainty prevails.
And this is why you want us to see exactly what out looks like, and then have a second referendum which chooses between in or out again. Is that correct?
I want something just a little different, but fundamentally so. I want to put Boris Johnson and his colleagues in charge of the negotiations. Now, he doesn't need to be the Prime Minister or the leader of the Conservative Party to do that, but he got us into this mess, and he got us into a mess on a range of platitudes about how glorious the alternative future would be. Let him show us what that future is. My own view, it has to be shown, is that it will be totally unattractive to the majority of members of Parliament.
Hence a second referendum at the end.
And so, how do you carry out the will of the people in this referendum, which I believe you should? The only way is to negotiate so that the members of the House of Commons, where sovereignty lies, can come to a judgment about whether they will vote for it. My view is they won't. But they must be given the chance. And when it comes to it, there are only two ways to do that. One is to have a general election. The other is to have a second referendum.
And overturn the first referendum.
To make sure that the will of the people is seen to have moment.
Lord Heseltine, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Not many political leaders in Europe have welcomed the British referendum result, but one who did is Marine Le Pen, the leader of the French Front National, the far-right party that commanded the support of about a quarter of French voters in the last elections there. The next French presidential election could see her down as one of the last two on the second ballot. Well, she's been giving her party something of a makeover, softening its far-right tone while keeping the thrust of the hardline message, which was framed by her father, the party founder. Emily went to Brussels today to meet Marine Le Pen for her first UK broadcast interview since the referendum.
Je crois qu'on a assisté à un événement historique, l'événement le plus important depuis la chute du mur de Berlin. Je pense que le courage du peuple britannique qui ne s'est pas laissé impressionner, intimider par les menaces, par le chantage, par le mensonge, par le catastrophisme des élites européistes, est une voie à suivre. Depuis 4 ans, je réclame, moi, l'organisation d'un référendum en France pour demander aux Français ce qu'ils pensent de l'Union européenne et s'ils souhaitent en sortir. Eh bien, les Britanniques ont tiré les premiers, en quelque sorte.
Vous avez parlé, félicité peut-être les monsieur Johnson, Farage, Gove.
Oui, j'ai félicité effectivement les leaders du livre, car je crois qu'ils ont réussi eux aussi à se faire entendre.
Vous avez parlé avec eux?
Bon, je connais M. Farage depuis longtemps, nous sommes collègues dans ce Parlement européen.
Aussi.
Je ne connais pas M. Johnson. Je pense d'ailleurs que certains voulaient sortir plus particulièrement pour des raisons, d'autres plus particulièrement pour d'autres raisons. Mais la vraie réalité, c'est qu'encore une fois, on est là sur un problème fondamental de liberté et de souveraineté.
Et ça va vous aider dans votre quête pour un Brexit maintenant?
Oui, pour 2 raisons. D'abord parce que c'est possible, contrairement à ce que disaient les dirigeants français et européens, qui nous expliquaient qu'il n'était pas possible de sortir de l'Union européenne. Eh bien, ce référendum a montré que c'est possible de le faire. Et deuxièmement, parce que je pense que très rapidement, malgré la stratégie du chaos organisée ou souhaitée par les institutions européennes, très rapidement, la Grande-Bretagne va avoir les bénéfices de cette sortie de l'Union européenne.
Et vous pensez maintenant que le Brexit va aider votre parti, le Front National?
Mais, oui, parce que, encore une fois, qu'est-ce qui a été démontré? Il a été démontré qu'alors que l'immense majorité des dirigeants européens, des médias, des politologues, des experts sont
des élites,
exactement pour le Remain, le peuple, lui, était pour le Brexit. Et je crois qu'il en est exactement de même en France. Je crois qu'il en est de même aux Pays-Bas. Je crois qu'il faudrait, dans chacun des pays de l'Union européenne, poser la question au peuple français, au peuple italien, au peuple néerlandais, au peuple suédois.
Vous pensez qu'il va être un référendum ici en France?
Si je gagne la présidentielle, il y aura un référendum. Sinon, il n'y en aura pas. Car l'ensemble des responsables politiques français sont opposés au référendum. Ils ont peur du peuple.
Vous parlez, madame, de la démocratie, de la liberté, mais beaucoup de gens voient la Front National et pensent que c'est un message de haine que vous colportez, que vous avez parlé des délinquants d'origine immigrés, que c'est ça, au fond, que vous voulez.
Non mais il n'y a aucune haine dans mon discours. Il y a une constatation des problèmes que nous vivons au quotidien.
Les problèmes causés par les immigrés.
Mais l'immigration massive est un problème majeur. Bien sûr, madame, quand on a 7 millions de chômeurs...
Ils sont délinquants.
Pardon, mais je n'ai jamais dit que les immigrés étaient tous des délinquants, madame. Jamais je n'ai tenu ces propos-là. D'ailleurs, si je les avais tenus, j'aurais été poursuivie devant un tribunal et j'aurais été condamnée. Je n'ai jamais tenu ces propos-là. Ça, c'est la propagande qui est développée par nos adversaires politiques. C'est la dénaturation systématique de nos propos. Nous disons clairement, nous avons 7 millions de chômeurs, 9 millions de pauvres, un Français sur 3 qui ne se soigne plus correctement parce qu'il n'en a plus les moyens. Et vous voulez importer des chômeurs ? Vous voulez faire venir des gens, vous allez leur offrir quoi? Vous allez les loger où? Vous allez les soigner comment? Voilà ce que nous disons.
Le Premier ministre en Grande-Bretagne a parlé d'un pic dans les enjeux racistes depuis Brexit. Ça vous inquiète un peu?
Ah ben, bien entendu, le racisme doit être combattu sans aucune espèce de difficulté. Il faut combattre le racisme, mais ce n'est pas causé par le Brexit. Encore une fois, il faut arrêter la propagande. Il faut arrêter la propagande. Et s'il y a des gens qui se croient autorisés, en raison de ce vote, pour faire preuve de racisme, eh bien, il faut les poursuivre et les condamner.
Parlons-nous de l'avenir, le futur de l'euro. Vous pensez, Nigel Farage a dit aujourd'hui, les MEP voient la face, que les autres pays vont quitter l'Union maintenant. Vous pensez que ça va...
Je pense que oui, le Parlement européen a très peur. Et encore une fois, s'il souhaite mettre en place ce processus de vengeance, de punition à l'égard de la Grande-Bretagne, c'est parce qu'ils craignent la mise en œuvre de référendums dans d'autres pays. Mais pourquoi le craignent-ils? Parce qu'ils savent que beaucoup de peuples souhaitent sortir de cette structure, qui est d'esprit totalitaire.
Vous pensez que le Brexit va passer?
Je le souhaite, car alors sinon, nous pouvons mettre au feu la Déclaration des droits de l'homme, les grandes valeurs de l'Europe. Si la volonté du peuple, encore une fois, n'est pas respectée, eh bien ça veut dire que nous sommes définitivement, de manière assumée, dans un système totalitaire.
C'est le même mouvement, vous pensez, qu'on voit maintenant aux États-Unis, avec Donald Trump?
Et Sanders. Et Sanders. N'analysez pas uniquement le cas Trump. Moi, je trouve que l'émergence de Donald Trump et de Bernie Sanders sont révélateurs d'un rejet du système politique, d'élites qui méprisent le peuple, qui travaillent, qui communautarisent le peuple, qui saucissonnent le peuple. Ils ne veulent plus de cela. Ils ne veulent plus de responsables politiques qui sont inféodés aux grandes multinationales, qui défendent des intérêts particuliers ou des intérêts catégoriels au détriment de l'intérêt général. Je pense que ce vent-là traverse toute la planète.
Sanders maintenant a quitté la course. Vous pensez que Donald Trump peut gagner? Vous aimeriez le voir gagner?
Non, mais moi je l'ai dit de la manière la plus claire qui soit. Tout le monde sauf Hillary Clinton. Tout sauf Hillary Clinton. Voilà. Je le dis sans coup férir. N'importe qui sauf Hillary Clinton.
Emily talking to Marine Le Pen, who obviously doesn't like Hillary Clinton. Financial markets had a referendum jolt last week and have been stumbling ever since. The pound and FTSE both had a good day today, recovering some of their lost ground. But while shares and currencies do provide an instant guide to the latest jumps up or down in sentiment, there is a real economy underneath, and it is, well, somewhat discombobulated too. It just moves much more slowly than the financial markets. Let's ponder on some of the economic effects, financial and real, short and long term. I'm joined by the former chief executive of Barclays, Anthony Jenkins, and Gillian Tett of the Financial Times. Anthony, bank shares pummeled more than most, down by about 30%. What's going on there?
Well, of course, banks hate uncertainty. They're basically a leverage play on the state of the economy. People think the economy is going to be weaker. And of course, with the prospect of lower interest rates for longer, that also affects the revenues of banks. But of course, banks have been under pressure for many months and years. If you look at the decline in bank stocks, partly because of the global economy, regulation and technology. So this is yet another problem.
But it's quite a big problem then.
It's a very big problem.
And what about the passporting? Because a lot of people have been saying you might lose your passport to operate throughout the single market. I mean, obviously they can operate still. It's just a bit more of a burden. How much of a problem is that going to be if they do lose the passport?
Well, passporting is absolutely key to our participation in financial services across Europe. Now, of course, remember that European banks also passport into the UK. So there is a reciprocity here.
Okay.
But like with many things in this debate, it's all going to be in the detail of the negotiation.
Right. What do you think about the banks, Gillian, first of all?
Well, banks have clearly been very badly damaged. It is partly because of the extreme uncertainty. Another very, very important part that people are ignoring is the degree to which interest rates expectations have absolutely collapsed in the last few days, not just in the UK, but globally. And that's hurting insurance companies too. But there's another very important point here, which is if you look at US banks and see how they're performing relative to European ones, there's a huge transatlantic split opening up. And I'm based in New York normally, and when I spoke to New York financiers a couple of days ago, as far as they're concerned, this has sealed the victory of the American banking sector on the global stage, and they think the European banks, including UK banks now, are basically in the dust.
And that's very interesting. Is that fair, by the way, that assessment, do you think?
I think there's lots of reasons why people might think that, particularly the size of the US economy. It's 6 times the size of the UK economy. So when you're trying to support a banking system which is big, it's difficult to do that in a much smaller economy. But I also think that there are a lot of pressures on the banks, and we'll probably see a fragmentation in Europe, a much more regional and local focus.
Okay. And it's not just that. I would say, as far as from the American point of view, what's happened with Brexit is a complete self-inflicted wound on an extraordinary scale. I mean, most Americans I know are absolutely shocked that any country would do this. Exactly.
It's a bit stressing.
And, you know, whether it's the banks, whether it's the real economy, whether it's almost anything else, this is regarded as a very big
We don't just want to talk about banks, though. So let's just be clear about potential for short-term financial contagion, Lehman's effects, all those kinds of things. Anthony, you worried about the next 6 months and getting through it?
I mean, what really matters now for banks and the system is, do you have enough liquidity? And the Bank of England has been very clear they'll provide liquidity. Do you know what your trading positions are? And do you have those under control? And are you hedging them appropriately? And also, are you keeping your clients and your own people on side? Because this is massively disruptive inside organizations when you go through these changes. So that's the short-term agenda for bank CEOs. My sense is they're doing a pretty good job in partnership with the authorities, and we learned a lot from 2008, and I think people are applying those lessons.
Are you worried about a crisis?
No, actually, you know what? I'm going to be optimistic, which I often have not been in the past, and say, actually, one good lesson of the last few days is the financial system as a whole has weathered it pretty well.
I mean, frankly, regulators and bankers have been to boot camp and back in terms of risk management because of all the things that have happened since 2008. So they can do this. The really big issue, though, is the medium to long term, the economic impact, because low interest rates, which are terrible for pensioners, terrible for savers, terrible for insurance companies, that can be very damaging. And what really frightens people right now is the prospect of years of soggy growth.
Can I suggest something, that this is this sort of an optimistic scenario, that for years the success of the city, Anthony, has kept sterling very high and has made lots of other industries in other parts of the country very uncompetitive. It's made it very difficult for the Middlesbroughs to compete internationally when it's stuck with a city pushing up the exchange rate. What this appears to have done is knock the exchange rate down. Maybe, if that's a permanent effect, we'll have a bit of a rebalancing. We've been calling for it, and maybe this will be a jolt for that.
Well, of course, one of the things that Thursday showed us was this massive fracture in our society, which is not good. Yeah. And so if this can be a catalyst for a rebalancing of the economy, my own view, and I've been quite open on this, is that the financial sector itself is going to contract over the coming years for all sorts of reasons, technology among them. So it will inevitably become smaller. But we have to seize this, difficult though it is, and Gillian's right about all the things she said. The uncertainty has to be removed. We have to seize this opportunity now to build the future of Britain.
And can I just jump in there and say, if you look at the Financial Times tomorrow's paper or what's on the website right now, you see stories like the fact that Vodafone is now thinking of moving its headquarters out of the UK. You see stories like Virgin having cancelled deals. You see so many indications, actually, it's not just the financial sector that's basically had a heart attack and is now basically freezing investment or preparing to move. It's other companies as well. And I would love to see the UK economy rebalanced, desperately love to see it. But what I fear is we're going to see it rebalanced all down to a lower level. And that's a tragedy.
Gillian, Anthony, thank you both very much. That's all we have time for. Such a busy week. I'll be back here tomorrow. Until then, very good night.